we forget about, and they're worth highlighting and discussing. Very few people are, NCAA champions and can hang at Syracuse, and can hang in Oklahoma in these programs, and then go on to Foxcatcher and have the kind of the Olympic ladder and these things. So can you share a little bit about that experience? Maybe
part of how I grew up, where I grew up is, if you had the ability, you're looking for a vehicle to get you kind of out of, there's not, again, there's nothing wrong with growing up in Toledo, Ohio. It's a fantastic place to grow up. Just for what I was trying to aspire to, it had very limited opportunities. I thought it did. And so, my whole thing was like, okay, how do I get to the next level? And that was wrestling. And, at my high school, the high school's been there for, like 100 years, coming up on, I think, 100 years. And I'm still the only state champion for AAA, which is the biggest division, out of my high school.
Wow.
In 100 years.
Wow.
So, it wasn't a wrestling powerhouse.
Right,
it was
exactly.
one of those things where, I ended up winning a state championship, which nobody's been able to do. And there's been a lot of really good wrestlers that have come through the program and stuff like that. So that was the first part. And the second part was, to get a scholarship. And it just happens that the World Cup of Wrestlings were held in Toledo, Ohio, and the assistant wrestling coach from Syracuse was participating in them. He came to my high school and talked. We had met. He invited me to a wrestling camp and saw me wrestle and just started recruiting me.
Cool.
And it's how I ended up at Syracuse. So, coincidentally, good luck. And, it took me, I joke and I say it took me to my senior year to win an NCAA championship. But, I'd rather have won one
sure.
than been, like a 3-time All-American or 4-time All-American. It just, it took what it took. And
you were a slightly later bloomer, but man, you were like at the world level, you were a powerhouse. You ran through Kurt Angle, you ran through Randy Couture. I mean, even in the head-to-head battles you had with Angle, there were so many other guys you won.
Yeah.
You won. You ultimately beat these guys. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it just so happens that the way it was set up back east, the predominant wrestling clubs back east, the number one wrestling club was Foxcatcher. So after college, you tried to get with Foxcatcher, and it was difficult to get accepted into that club just because it had a very high prestige. They paid their athletes well for wrestlers. And, it ends up being a situation where my coach at the time in college was a guy named Chris Campbell. And Chris Campbell was good friends with Dave Schultz. And Dave Schultz was the coach at Foxcatcher. So what my coach said, Chris Campbell said, hey, listen, I can only take you so far. And in order for you to get to the next level, you're going to need influences from other coaches. And he goes, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up for you to go down to Team Foxcatcher and start training down there. And so I started going down, from Syracuse, it's like a 4-hour drive. So I'd go down there and I'd train over weekends or I'd train during the week. And so I started building this relationship with Dave Schultz. And Dave was like, because I'm still only like a 23-year-old kid, and I was like, hey, can like put the good word in, and it's all this other stuff. And then, so in the 1993 Freestyle Nationals, I ended up taking 4th place. And then in the 93 World Team Trials, I ended up winning the World Team Trials.
Right.
And I beat Kurt Angle, I beat Kurt Trost, I beat a guy named John Llewellyn, who had beat me twice in the Nationals. All these guys. And literally after I took 4th at Nationals, I'm like, I'm better than this.
Yeah.
And so I just trained my ass off. And once I won the World Team Trials and made it to the 93 Worlds, that's when Foxcatcher was like, okay, you're obviously good enough to be one of us. And they ended up bringing me on.
Now, did you win the FILA again after that, right after that as well?
Um,
Or
so the way it worked out was the so I placed fifth in the worlds, which were in Toronto, which were my
Mhm.
first worlds.
Mhm.
Um, and the way that the world team trials work out is the world team trials, the number one ranked wrestler gets first choice for world competitions and all that for that calendar year.
Okay.
So I ended up wrestling in the 94 World Cups. I ended up winning the 94 World Cups. I ended up winning the 94 Freestyle Nationals. I ended up winning. So I go on a roll
Yeah.
until I get to the Worlds in 1994 and I blow my ACL out. First match, first round, first 30 seconds. And those were in Istanbul, Turkey.
Wow. Unbelievable. And
Yeah,
Turkey too.
horror.
It's the greatest
Oh
wrestling.
gosh, man,
Yeah.
it
Wow.
was the guy who I ended up losing to. I ended up finishing the match because
Mhm.
I remember going to the trainer saying, my knee's screwed. Can I injure it worse? And he just kind of looked at me and was like, no. And so I was like, okay. I went out and finished the match, and I get back to the States. They do an MRI. They look, my ACL's just shredded, and it's just that was an interesting year. That whole year
Yeah.
leading up till me wrestling Kurt Angle again, and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So
Yeah. It was amazing. Your wrestling